Chapter 11 Weapons. Thinking this, Duyuki couldn't help but glance curiously at the large mound of earth. The monstrous insect had emerged from its hiding place with a considerable stir while pursuing Duyuki, leaving a large pit in the hollow mound. Duyuki stood by the pit. Peering down, he nearly stumbled back, overwhelmed by the sight. 2 mangled corpses lay within, each riddled with several large holes where the insect had bitten. The gruesome scene and the stench of blood rising from the pit almost knocked him off his feet. No wonder. The last of Duyuki's doubts vanished. So that's how the insect healed within the earth mound. It had 2 corpses to feed on. Just as Duyuki was about to turn and leave, he noticed his own scorched and tattered clothes, and his pitted and scarred cleaver. He sighed, frowned, and jumped down into the pit to search the bodies. It's fine, just another anatomy lesson. 5 minutes later, Duyuki clambered out of the pit, his hands bloody, holding a rather long, sheathed katana. The scabbard was exquisitely crafted, shimmering with a faint light, and the character's inheritance were inscribed on its back. Duyuki drew the katana, momentarily stunned. A silvery light like the surface of a moonlit lake, serene, mysterious, tranquil, seemed to ripple across the blade. This is something that modern technology absolutely could not produce, Duyuki immediately concluded. He gripped the hilt and made a few practice swings. A surge of heat coursed through his veins, as if resonating with the blade. Power flowed from the sword into his body, making it feel perfectly natural in his hand, as if he had wielded such a weapon countless times before, having recovered a makeshift weapon. Duyuki wrapped the strange insect's carapace around himself. He looked odd, but at least felt a little safer. He realized his immediate priority was finding water, primarily because he was thirsty, and secondarily because his hands were covered in blood from searching bodies, and even his clothes were splattered. Comfort aside, wandering through this perilous forest reeking of blood was suicidal. Fortunately, Duyuki remembered passing a stream nearby and immediately retraced his steps. Darkness was falling. After drinking his fill by the stream and cleaning the blood from his body, Duyuki decided against continuing onward. He first planned to leave the water source, as beasts would also come to drink, and wandering blindly in the dark forest was too dangerous. Leaving the water, he decided to find a tree to climb and wait in the canopy until dawn. However, as he washed his face and prepared to leave, he noticed something hanging from the water plants in the stream. Duyuki looked closer, his pupils constricting. It was an arm. The severed hand was stiffly half-clenched, caught by the nearby water plants bobbing gently in the current. Duyuki noticed a hazy mist of blood still dissipating in the water, carried away by the stream's flow. Perhaps others wouldn't know what this meant, but as a medical student with excellent grades, Duyuki understood. This indicated the arm had been severed very recently, within 10 minutes at most. This meant a fierce battle had taken place not far upstream. The battle had likely just ended, or was even still ongoing. Without hesitation, Duyuki ran towards the upstream. Darkness was falling, making the light even more noticeable. After running about 60 or 70 meters along the stream, he saw flickering lights and heard the sounds of fighting, roars and angry shouts. Then he saw a camp. The camp was in chaos. A dozen humanoid creatures, tall-eared, large-nosed, hunched-backed, with small decorative flags on their backs and red skin, were raiding it. They emitted strange cries, much like the goblins of legend. Their eyes glowed with an eerie red light, captivating and unsettling, as if they were being controlled. These red-skinned goblins didn't just wield scimitars, they also hurled fireballs in parabolic arcs. While the range and speed were manageable, the lingering flames upon impact proved a significant distraction. 6 individuals, locked in a desperate struggle, were surrounded. They wore matching uniforms with distinct black and blue stripes, clearly identifying them as members of the same organization. 2 lay on the ground, their fates uncertain. 1, seemingly a spellcaster in a robe, knelt behind his companion, clutching a only 3 remained capable of fighting, and their combat style was a revelation to Duyuki. They fought with unrestrained power, wielding enormous weapons. 1 used a heavy battle axe, while the other 2 wielded what looked like massive wooden pillars. Closer inspection revealed them to be totem poles intricately carved with runes. Each swing required a powerful build-up, but the resulting whoosh of air, a thunderous roar like a charging war cart, cleaved through the goblins, sending them sprawling and screaming. Meanwhile, the spellcaster wasn't idle. He periodically conjured a wash basin-sized snowman, which, with a bizarre smile, hopped towards nearby enemies, embracing them before exploding with considerable damage. Chapter 12 Rescue. As the snowman exploded, a hail of ice shards scattered, whirling and slicing like knives, further damaging nearby enemies. The goblins' fireballs, however, seemed to counter the snowman's power effectively, often killing or severely injuring those struck. From his concealed vantage point, Duyuki quickly understood the precariousness of the situation. While possessing superior individual strength, the warriors faced a critical flaw. The lingering flames from the goblins' fireballs severely restricted the remaining fighters' movement. Their need to protect their wounded comrades further hampered them, making retreat impossible. The cunning goblins exploited this, targeting the immobile injured, forcing the others to endure direct hits, creating a deadly cycle. Upon noticing this, Duyuki naturally wouldn't stand idly by. He quietly circled around and approached from the rear. He winced at the 2 large blisters on his palms, gritted his teeth, drew his sword, and endured the pain, wrapping half a piece of his clothing tightly around his hand and the hilt. Why did Duyuki take the back route? because he'd seen several wounded red goblins being carried to the rear. He stealthily approached without being detected and naturally grasped the katana, its blade shimmering with silver light. He plunged it straight into the throat of a red goblin that was writhing in agony. The goblin's cries abruptly ceased, its hands clutched desperately at the katana, its eyes wide with terror as it struggled wildly, but to no avail. Duyuki gently withdrew the blade, ending its life. Duyuki expected a strong reaction after killing the goblin, but perhaps the near-death experiences he'd endured had hardened his nerves. Watching life drain away before him, he felt an unsettlement. He then swiftly killed 4 more wounded red goblins before finally being discovered. A red goblin shrieked, hurled a fireball towards him. The fireball scattered numerous sparks in the air, forming a clear line of fire that rotated and shot towards him. However, its speed wasn't particularly fast, more like a thrown stone lacking tracking ability. The environment was a dense forest. Duyuki easily dodged, slipping behind a large tree, allowing the fireball to miss completely and engulf the tree trunk in flames. Next he faced a red goblin, wielding a curved blade, roaring with rage and charging towards him. Duyuki wasn't panicked by the incoming attack. Honestly, compared to the fierce speed of the monstrous insect earlier, this red goblin's strike was incredibly slow. Duyuki sidestepped, and his katana sliced horizontally. The dodge and strike were effortless, as if honed through countless repetitions. The silver blade swept along the goblin's curved blade, severing its handguard and 4 fingers holding the weapon in one swift motion. This attack, both defensive and offensive, inflicted devastating damage with the simplest of means. A perfect example of refined efficiency. One of the red goblins had 4 fingers severed on his right hand, and his curved blade had fallen to the ground. He clutched his wrist and screamed in agony. Seizing the opportunity, Duyuki rushed forwardly and swung his longsword horizontally. He felt a sharp jolt in his hand, a burning pain in his tiger's mouth, but then 2 more screams rang out from the enemy. In the eyes of the attacking red goblins, Duyuki's sweeping sword had unleashed a ribbon of silver light. 2 goblins, shrieking, raised their curved blades to meet the blow. Their weapons were cleaved in 2, and they were grievously wounded. One of the severed blade halves flew through the air, embedding itself with a thwack in a nearby tree, vibrating for a long time afterward. This incredibly sharp strike wasn't due to Duyuki's skill, but entirely to the superior quality of his weapon. By this point, this unexpected arrival had finally drawn their attention. Duyuki found himself surrounded by 5 or 6 red goblins who had rushed to the scene. They shrieked and roared in furious rage. These red goblins were skilled in both magic and combat. If they were to throw fireballs, the situation would become extremely tricky. Just as Duyuki considered retreating to avoid a direct confrontation, a very old-looking red goblin pointed at him. His eyes were filled with utter terror, his features contorted, emitting a bizarre guttural sound. At the old goblin's gesture, the other red goblins also displayed extreme fear, retreating in unison. Duyuki then noticed that their gazes were focused on a single point, the strange insect carapace strapped to his body. A thought struck him, and he charged forward, sword raised. With this charge, the 5 or 6 goblins immediately dropped their curved blades. As if they had seen a ghost. Screaming, they fled into the depths of the forest. The goblins were already struggling to overcome their opponents, and Duyuki's unexpected intervention and attack caused their lines to collapse. They scattered, fleeing without a word. With the goblins gone, the remaining survivors were at the end of their strength, unable to pursue. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. After a while, the large man with the great axe managed to stagger to his feet, his body covered in blood, to thank Duyuki. Duyuki realized the giant's words weren't any language from Earth, yet he understood them instinctively and replied in kind. After only a few exchanges, Duyuki glanced behind him, his heart leaping into his throat. He rushed forward urgently, shouting, "Don't do that." Chapter 13 Explanations. While the giant was talking to him, the other 2 men, after a brief rest, had begun to try and rescue their companion. Their actions were clumsy, lacking even basic first aid knowledge. While moving the chest, injured man, one lifted the head, the other the feet. Duyuki's intervention came too late. He saw the unfortunate man groan in pain, a torrent of blood spurting from his mouth. Seeing this, Duyuki immediately knew the injury had worsened. The lifting had likely driven fractured ribs into the lungs. He yelled at them to stop. Duyuki was a third-year medical student at a prestigious university. His father was the director of the emergency department at a top-tier hospital. His maternal grandfather had been a doctor for generations, a renowned and respected figure in the local community, running a successful clinic combining traditional Chinese and Western medicine. His mother was a nurse at the clinic. Since high school, Duyuki had spent his free time helping out at his family's clinic and the hospital's emergency room. His parents believed in mastering a skill and had planned a medical career for him. He was no stranger to car accidents, stab wounds, or falls. His clinical experience in emergency care was extensive. He even had a good grasp of acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. Thanks to his grandfather's tutelage, he wasn't an expert in everything, but he certainly knew the basics. The 2 burly men were initially unsure what Duyuki meant, but seeing their companion bleed profusely, they hastily stopped. Duyuki rushed over, quickly examined the injured man and began treatment. He found the man's physical constitution surprisingly robust, giving him confidence to proceed. Duyuki proceeded to clear the airway, perform a needle thoracostomy at the intersection of the second rib and mid-clavicular line. immobilize the cervical spine, dress the wounds, and externally splint the broken bones, a series of actions performed with textbook precision. The onlookers, though unsure of his methods, seemed impressed by his skill and readily helped when instructed. When they saw their companion had improved significantly, and their faces lit up with relief. Yuki, having finished his work, wiped his sweat, gulped down several mouthfuls of water, and was about to give some instructions when, turning around, he saw the group doing something unexpected. They had taken out what looked like vials of medicine and were quickly administering it to the injured. Before Yuki could react, the medicine had already been ingested, leaving him unable to stop them. This left Yuki dumbfounded. After receiving the medicine, the injured showed a rapid and significant improvement. The man who had lost his hand, previously unconscious from blood loss, was now regaining color and even began to wake up. The other two could now speak. What was going on? In Yuki's understanding, even after his emergency treatment, these injuries would require surgery and at least 3 to 5 days of hospitalization. Their recovery in mere minutes was completely beyond his comprehension. At this point, the group approached Yuki. After introductions, he learned that the mage-like individual was Zhou Yang, an icebinder. The wielder of the great axe was Haifu, a saint. The user of the totem pole was also a saint, named Lu Yangshi, and the unfortunate one with the severed hand was a mechanist named Mega. Yuki's distinctly different attire had obviously made him the center of attention. As he pondered how to explain his origins, Icebinder Zhou Yang stared at him for a moment, then suddenly exclaimed, "I remember! Has the warrior minx summoned from another dimension?" Now it was Yuki's turn to be speechless. Though no one else seemed to notice, Zhou Yang explained to the others, "You all know how dangerous the situation was. Lady Lena was severely injured and escaped, and our defenses were on the verge of collapse. Ming-Si, along with other summoners, used their ultimate move, summoning Casiel. However, this summoning ritual seems to require the Moon Empress rank to perform, so something went wrong. It seems the summoning of Casiel failed, yet a summoning contract was somehow still established. I was helping Ming-Si stabilize her fluctuating magic at the time, and I saw the response in the feedback mirror after the contract was formed. The image in the mirror was blurry, but your attire is too distinctive. I could mistake you." Observing the bewildered expression on Yuki's face, Zhou Yang quickly deduced the truth based on his extensive experience. "Could it be Priest Du that this is your first summoning?" "What? I've been summoned? Then doesn't that mean I've become a summoned being? And what the heck is a priest?" Yuki found the reality incredibly difficult to accept, even more so the unfamiliar title. However, after a brief explanation he understood. It was clearly not Earth, they were in another plane of existence. Those who could perform healing functions here were called clerics, hence the title Priest Du, essentially equivalent to Dr. Du on Earth. After a moment, however, Yuki remembered a crucial question and asked Zhou Yang with a mixture of nervousness, apprehension, and excitement. "You said I was summoned, so what happens when the summoning time is up?" Before Zhou Yang could answer, Haifu chuckled beside him. "What? Priest Du, you'll naturally return to wherever you came from. Isn't that obvious? I can go back." Yuki's eyes lit up, he eagerly pressed on. However, the questions he pressed were, to the others, common sense questions, like repeatedly asking someone if they went to middle school and university after primary school, or if there were girls in a nightclub, the sort that made people impatient to answer. Fortunately, Yuki had fought alongside this group from the start, and his unique healing methods had impressed them, so they answered his questions. Chapter 14, Crystal Civilization. Soon, Yuki learned a great deal through conversation with them. First, he could return to Earth, but he wouldn't stay long. If the mage Ming-Si who summoned him died, he would return immediately. If she didn't die, according to their summoning contract, he would be there for more than 2 days. Second, according to Joan, some summoned beings appeared as projections. For example, the Casillas had mentioned earlier, if a projection died, the original was unharmed, only losing a part of its soul imprint. However, if it appeared in its true form, death in the summoned world meant true death. Obviously, Yuki didn't believe he was a projection, so he had to protect himself. Third, this place seemed to be called the Arad continent. The name was vaguely familiar to Yuki. He felt he'd heard it somewhere on Earth, but couldn't recall it. Besides that, the instantly effective potions they'd drunk were alchemically brewed, but with significant side effects. Firstly, they were expensive. Frequent use reportedly drained one's life force. There were even cases of people turning grey overnight after a severe injury and using healing potions. After a discussion, the group decided to make camp. As they were separated from the main force but the enemy was severely wounded, Black Axe swung his axe, quickly felling a number of trees. He quickly created a palisade around the camp, and then the mage, Zhou chanted an incantation, covering the palisade with a thick layer of ice, making it very difficult to climb and effectively deterring enemies. After finishing the palisade, the wounded mechanic, Mega, struggled to his feet. He produced a track seemingly made of aluminum alloy and laid it around the camp. Then, 2 unique-looking machines appeared on the track, seemingly designed to run on it. Noticing Yuki's curious gaze, Maka, his face pale, smiled proudly and pointed to the machinery, introducing it. X730 Viper cannon, dual-barreled. Core technology 3 nanometers, power consumption an unprecedented 5 millicrystals with infrared identification, dual high energy machine. and an intelligent identification system capable of effectively identifying enemies from 100 meters away. Maka then produced a metal box-like object, plugging its interface into the track. He took out a small, colorless, transparent crystal, though somewhat cloudy, inserting it into the adjacent track's control system. A humming sound filled the air, and the EX-730 Viper cannon began to slowly move along the track surrounding the camp, with power supplied. A cover on the metal cube-like object opened, revealing dark holes, indicator lights flickered, and miniature drone-like weapons launched from the holes. Maka's eyes gleamed with excitement and fervor as he introduced them. G17 Predaparalic, core technology 3 nanometers, power consumption reduced to only 1 millicrystal, 6 units total. They'll fly within 100 square meters, using random routes and speeds. Upon encountering an enemy, they'll attach, inflicting continuous damage. The electrical current can even paralyze. Destruction of a unit will cause a powerful explosion. He then produced several badge-like items, gesturing for everyone to attach them. The G17 Predator's intelligence is still insufficient. Identification relies on microcapacitors. Please carry these identity tags to avoid being attacked. Duyuki watched Maka's actions, overwhelmed, had expected primitive weapon, given the apparent reliance on swords, and was astonished by this advanced technology. Seeing the defenses completed and the surroundings secure, Black Axe sat down on a nearby tree stump, removing a pair of gloves and casually placing them beside him. Duyuki had long been curious about Black Axe's gloves. They looked high-tech, mechanically crafted. Rotating bearings on the steel knuckles hummed softly, intricate internal mechanisms were visible. Black Axe removed his gloves, flipped a switch on his wrist, and took out a dull, colorless crystal. He tossed it carelessly onto the ground, seemingly without a care. Duyuki curiously asked, "What does that mechanical glove do?" Hearing Duyuki's question, Black Axe chuckled. "Oh, this is just an egg," greatly amplifying the wearer's strength. Normally, the threshold to become one of us, a cleric, is quite high. We often fight continuously using heavy axes, heavy scythes, totem poles, giant weapons, but with this mechanical glove, the barrier is lowered. Duyuki nodded, understanding. He asked Black Axe to activate it again, and after putting it on and using it himself, he discovered that it was indeed true. However, the sudden increase in strength made him quite uncomfortable. At the same time, without needing to be told, Duyuki noticed something else. He had only been in this arid world for 3 or 4 hours, yet, from the damaged self-propelled logging mecha he first encountered, to the nocturnal defense system he saw earlier, and now this mechanical glove, it all seemed to revolve around one thing: crystals. It felt like these things were the equivalent of gasoline or electricity on Earth, supporting half of the entire civilization. Whatever, I just need to get through the next day and I can go home. Duyuki shook his head, dismissing his random thoughts. His attention was quickly drawn to the aroma emanating from the field kitchen nearby. In a state of starvation, his resistance to food was completely negative. Chapter 15. Reinforcements. The large man named Lu quickly placed a large plate of food in front of Duyuki, smiling warmly. "If you hadn't shown up, I swear Mecha would still be unconscious! It must be the divine spirits who brought you to us. Come, try my cooking!" The plate of food in front of him didn't look particularly appealing. It resembled curry chicken. But the moment Duyuki took a bite, he found it incredibly delicious. It contained incredibly tender, unidentified chunks of meat that were delightful to chew. Already ravenously hungry, Duyuki devoured the entire plate. Lu immediately heaped another large spoonful onto his plate, chuckling. "This is a special dish I made using wine from, mixed with black octopus tentacles from the west coast. I even added a special ingredient, celestial pearl powder. Eat up, don't be shy." As they ate and chatted, Duyuki went to pour water and noticed a mechanical glove casually tossed aside by Haifu. It bore the inscription Norton Technology, which struck him as strangely familiar. He couldn't help but ask, "Norton, sounds like a person's name." Lu immediately replied seriously, "That's one of the greatest scientists in millennia." He single-handedly advanced the energy-based application of small crystals, the founder of crystal technology. Although he passed away centuries ago, the brilliance of his intellect still shines upon us. "Oh, I see." Duyuki nodded. A man whose name is still easily recalled and revered centuries after his death. The word great truly doesn't do him justice. However, Duyuki felt increasingly that he'd heard the name Norton somewhere before, yet he couldn't recall where. He decided to let it go. After eating his fill, Duyuki placed the katana he'd obtained next to the bonfire. He then went to search for herbs nearby. Besides the aching muscles and bones all over his body, he needed to treat the large blisters on his hands. When he returned, Black Axe was seen holding Duyuki's katana with a grave expression, before asking, "Where did you get this weapon?" "Before I met you, I encountered a very strange and powerful insect. I managed to kill it with great difficulty, and found 2 corpses in its makeshift nest. I found this weapon next to one of them." Duyuki then calmly recounted his previous experience. Black Axe remained silent for a while, asked a couple of questions about the corpse's clothing, then closed his eyes, sat down painfully by the fire, and suddenly covered his face, his shoulders trembling. He seemed very distraught. Lu and the others were quite shocked, and said, "Could you tell us more about the insect?" Duyuki took off his chitinous armor and casually tossed it over. "Well, this thing was pulled from the insect. I saw that it was quite light, so I used it as makeshift protection." Lu immediately took the chitinous breastplate and examined it carefully, finally looking at Duyuki with respect and amazement. "That's right, you encountered an adult Luku-gu. This thing is extremely vicious. From the larval stage they devour each other, feeding on their siblings. They are incredibly difficult to deal with. It is said that they are only found in an underground ruin, and their ferocity far surpasses other monsters. Its bodily fluids are corrosive enough to damage weapons. No wonder those red goblins ran from you. They clearly feared it. We usually avoid them. How did you kill it? Duyuki shrugged and chuckled wryly. When I encountered the monster, it was already severely injured and in poor condition. It could barely chase me. I finally killed it using the terrain and a broken logging mech. What about Black Axe? Maga shrugged. Black Axe was in love with a girl. He looked back at the big man, a hint of regret in his voice. Unfortunately, that girl's neighbor was a merchant. This money-grubbing fellow, in his haste to save time, passed through the cursed Hamelin region. He fell ill upon returning home, spreading a terrible plague throughout the town. The girl begged Black Axe to take care of her younger brother before she died. Maga sighed. If I'm not mistaken, the sword you're using now was bought by Black Axe with 3 years' worth of savings. It's said to be a top-quality product from the famous Tiesu weapons shop in the capital of Shushu, a rare heirloom weapon, the mystical Silver Lake Narcissus katana. 3 months ago, Black Axe gave this weapon to the girl's younger brother Xiaofei as a birthday. Our recent ambush, the rear guard where Xiaofei was stationed, suffered the strongest attack. After listening to Meka's words, Duyuki could only sigh. He walked to Haifu's side, handed him the weapon, and whispered, "Please accept my condolences. I see his wound is in his chest, so he shouldn't have suffered much before he passed." Haifu shook his head, and after a while choked out, "Thank you. Knowing the truth is enough for me. I have no use for this sword, so I give it to you. Strictly speaking, I should be thanking you for avenging him." Since he said so, Duyuki didn't refuse taking the sword back. After a while of further conversation, Duyuki popped the large blisters on his hands, crushed the collected herbs and applied them. The burning sensation immediately lessened considerably. He then wrapped himself in a blanket and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, he awoke to intermittent rumbling explosions. Needless to say, Duyuki was the last to wake. When he scrambled to his feet, the others were already fully armed and on high alert. Haifu was already activating his mechanical gauntlets, shouting, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" Those explosions are clearly Gol and the others using electric grenades. We have to go save them. Everyone immediately ran towards the scene, leaving the camp behind. At this point, Duyuki noticed something. Those who had received his treatment yesterday and had drunk the alchemic restorative potion, after a night's rest, could almost walk on their own. The speed of their recovery truly amazed him, unbeknownst to Duyuki. While he found this recovery rate extraordinary, the others felt the same sense of disbelief. While alchemic potions heal quickly, they also have numerous side effects. Of course, priests possess basic battlefield first aid technique, but these are passed down orally, relying on accumulated experience rather than systematic instruction, unlike the comprehensive textbooks on emergency medicine found on Earth. Furthermore, untreated wounds sutured with alchemic potions can lead to foreign bodies growing into the flesh. This might not be noticeable initially, but over time it develops into painful ulceration. Improper bone setting results in deformities or limited functionality after healing. Chapter 116 Shadow Knight Cat. Of course, the Arad world also possesses powerful advanced medical techniques. These include direct wound repair in nutrient tanks, high-level divine arts, at great cost, can regrow limbs, resurrect the dead, and there are even rumors of combining technology and magic for powerful cloning. However, these methods are not widespread, their use is extremely demanding, and they are limited to a very small percentage of the population. Even if ordinary people could afford it, the costs are prohibitive. Therefore, in the eyes of others, Duyuki, a doctor from another world, using his healing techniques to treat the wounded, increase the efficacy of expensive alchemic potions by at least 5 to 7 times, and with virtually no terrible side effects. Such ability is astonishing. Because of this, Duyuki himself didn't notice that he, initially at the front and outer edge of the group while traveling, was gradually and subtly moved to the middle and inner part of the formation, alongside the mage Xuanhuan, receiving strict protection. This would undoubtedly be the safest position in combat. John, moreover, discreetly collected the paper towel Duyuki used to wipe the blood after lancing the blisters, seemingly with great care. No one else noticed. Soon, they arrived at the battlefield, an open hillside where a group of people were fighting a retreating action. Duyuki observed that among them were individuals wielding strangely shaped firearms, firing continuously, others wielding staffs, yet fighting in the front lines in melee combat, and 2 warriors wielding swords and chains wrapped around their right arms. Those with firearms, in addition to ranged attacks, periodically drew grenades from their waists, throwing them to cause chaos among the enemy. Duyuki also noticed that their firearms resembled hand crossbows more than anything else. Their rate of fire was significantly slower than those on Earth. These fighters employed a unique combat style, a blend of firearms and martial arts. They moved with agility and freedom amidst their enemies, a stark contrast to the earthbound, prone or kneeling positions of typical firearm users. Their foes included not only the previously encountered hordes of red goblins, but also a dozen or so bizarre humanoid monsters. These humanoids were hunched over, possessing incredibly muscular arms that wielded weapons resembling heavy pickaxes. Each wore a massive skull as a helmet, a chaotic collection of pig, bear, horse, and ox skulls, blood red, Sinister lights flickered from within the skull's gaps, and each carried a heavy sack on its back. These humanoid monsters acted as the core and backbone of the Red Goblin forces. Their immense strength and ferocity were evident. They let out guttural roars during combat. One warrior, surrounded by two such creatures, was forced into a staggering retreat after being struck by their pickaxes. In direct confrontation, he was no match for them. Upon seeing these monsters, the mage, Xuanhuan, exclaimed in shock, Those monsters are vile buffalo diggers." Hearing the name vile buffalo diggers, Lu was equally stunned. "Are you sure?" Xuanhuan spoke while simultaneously casting a spell. Her hands moved in a fluid gesture, conjuring a leaping snowman into the fray. Then, with a grim expression, she said, "Of course I'm sure, these fiends are infamous and incredibly dangerous. Thankfully, I haven't seen the vile buffalo captain, otherwise, this battle would be unwinnable. Our best bet is to escape immediately," Heifu added, enraged. "What the hell are these bastards up to? First, the Luku Chiang, and now even these monsters that have been lurking underground for hundreds of years are being provoked. They're not afraid of death!" Yuki was completely bewildered by these conversations. But once he returned to the battlefield, his attention was immediately drawn to the bloody carnage. Although he was protected in the center of the group, there were simply too many enemies. Soon, a red goblin wielding a curved blade lunged at him. A ferocious expression on its face. This time, Yuki was prepared. He drew the heirloom katana at his waist and slashed. A sharp clang resonated as he cleaved a large gap in the goblin's blade. It was a clear demonstration of superior weapon quality. Seeing his weapon almost instantly destroyed, the red goblin froze, looked down at the large gash in its blade, let out a strange cry, and hurled the broken weapon at Yuki before turning tail and fleeing in a pathetic, scrambling. Yuki hadn't anticipated such a reaction. He didn't know that goblins were inherently bullies, prone to intimidation. He was momentarily stunned. At that moment, a large clump of earth exploded from the ground nearby. A thick, purplish-black shadow shot out, emitting a clicking sound as it flew through the air. It was a terrifying Luku Chiang bursting from the earth, its mandibles rotating wildly in the air as it lunged towards the nearby cleric. Before, Yuki had underestimated the Luku Chiang, thinking it was nothing special, easily dispatched. But now witnessing its full speed firsthand, cold sweat broke out on his back. He muttered to himself, "This speed is insanely overpowered," and quickly shouted a warning. Fortunately, the Luku Chiang targeted Lu. While powerfully built, Lu possessed remarkable agility, capable of incredible feats of movement. As soon as Lu perceived the immense danger, he dove and rolled, narrowly evading the creature's attack. At that instant, the mage, Xuanhuan, let out a cry, spitting out a mouthful of blood, clearly having overexerted herself magically. With a point of her finger, a strange cry echoed through the air. A distorted, elongated, dark shadow appeared, colliding with the Luku Chiang, passing right through it before returning to Xuanhuan, inflicting devastating two-stage damage. "Shadow Nightcat!" The mutated insect let out a strange cry, and after being struck, it was thrown into a rigid state, looking extremely painful. With dark energy swirling around its carapace. Chapter 017, The Falling Phoenix Hammer. At this moment, Lu swiftly sidestepped forward, arriving at the side of the mutated insect. He let out a roar, then abandoned the totem pole he was holding. A silvery light shone on his fist. With a swift step forward, he unleashed a powerful punch! This punch was preceded by a clear wind-up, a straight punch that exploded with force. His entire body surged forward with the blow. The punch like a cannon shot, containing explosive power. This was Lu's most skilled combat technique. The straight punch assault! With this punch, even if a wall stood before him, he would shatter it! Yuki, observing from the side, saw clearly that when the punch landed on the mutated insect's carapace, a significant dent appeared, showcasing its immense power. After taking this punch, the mutated insect was immediately sent flying, tumbling and twisting in the air, letting out a cry. Taking advantage of the momentum, it opened its mouth and spat out a highly viscous, dark green liquid that struck Yang Shi, another participant locked in a desperate battle, in the face. A blinding white smoke immediately erupted. Yang Shi immediately fell to the ground with a cry, frantically clawing at his face. The wicked buffalo excavator he was fighting let out a cackling laugh, raised its heavy shovel, and brought it down with a devastating blow. Blood and flesh. And Yang Shi died instantly, without even a chance for rescue. Seeing this, Black Axe's eyes turned bloodshot. The power of the crystal-powered gloves on his hands instantly surged to their limit. A teeth-grinding engine roar could be heard from the gloves, and large amounts of black smoke billowed out, the words Norton Technology on them glowing with an intense red light. Immediately, Black Axe leaped into the air, wielding his massive axe in a powerful downward swing, the force akin to a mountain collapsing. This was Black Axe's signature technique. Falling Phoenix Hammer. The hammer blow struck with devastating force, leaving the mutated insect no chance to escape. It let out a strange, mournful cry as it was smashed into the ground, followed by a shower of ice shards, exploding grenades and flying fists. The instantaneous attack was of unparalleled intensity. Despite its tough, thick carapace, the mutated insect couldn't withstand such an assault, rolling and screaming in agony. At this moment, Yuki felt a surge of relief. Had been incredibly lucky yesterday, encountering a mutated insect even larger than this one. If that creature had been only slightly less injured, retaining even a fraction of its strength. But then, Yuki heard someone shouting nearby. He turned sharply, his heart leaping into his throat. Most of the group had rushed to attack the mutated insect, leaving him exposed in the center of the formation. A vicious buffalo digger charged towards him like a raging bull. Yuki's first instinct was to avoid a direct confrontation. He sidestepped, noticing the creature's surprising ability to turn during its charge. It swung its heavy pickaxe down at him. The situation looked dire, but just then a smoking grenade tumbled from the rear, exploding with a bang right in front of the creature. The grenade seemed to have not only explosive power but also a blinding flash, leaving Yuki momentarily dazzled. The vicious buffalo digger fared even worse. Having spent its life underground, it was far more sensitive to bright light than a normal creature. It shrieked, staggering into a nearby tree. Yuki breathed a sigh of relief. Looking back, he saw a tall, thin man in leather trousers and aviator-style goggles. The man waved, then smoothly spun the cylinder of his revolver, ejecting 7 or 8 spent casings with a clatter. With a flick of his wrist, he reloaded. The series of movements was breathtakingly swift yet precise, possessing an almost indescribable beauty. The tall, thin man sidestepped, firing 3 quick shots at a nearby red goblin. To Yuki's astonishment, the goblin kept charging even after being hit. Yuki didn't dare dawdle. The vicious buffalo digger had recovered, its deep red eyes, brimming with tears, staring intently from behind its skull-like head. It raised its pickaxe and charged again. The sight of the digger's arm made Yuki uneasy, thicker than his own thigh, bulging with veins. Despite its brutal appearance, however, Yuki had already identified its weakness. The most terrifying enemy is the unknown, but even the strongest foe, once its weakness is known. Facing the charging enemy, Yuki casually shifted a couple of steps sideways, gripping his katana, preparing to counterattack. This action made several onlookers gasp. Xuanhuan Jones simultaneously cried out in alarm, shouting, "Watch out!" The vicious buffalo digger appeared brutish and reckless, but this was a facade. Years spent in the darkness had honed its patience. Normally, Yuki's dodge would have been useless. The digger could easily change direction mid-charge, sending him flying before crushing him to a pulp with its heavy pickaxe. Xuanhuan closed her eyes in despair, realizing the situation was hopeless. Yuki was a valuable asset, a goldmine about to be lost. But then, something bizarre happened. Having effortlessly changed direction, inexplicably froze as it faced Yuki. Chapter 018 Wisdom is also power. The sluggish moment for the evil buffalo digger lasted only a second, perhaps less, but in this face-to-face battle, a second was an eternity. Yuki, already poised, drew his sword with a clean, swift motion, a full-powered horizontal slash, gripping the blade with both hands. The silver light on the katana's blade flowed like water. Yuki's strike as smooth as flowing clouds, clearly the result of at least a decade of dedicated practice. The angle, the force impeccable, a textbook perfect cut, one that would elicit involuntary applause from any observer. Even if Yuki claimed he'd never used a sword before yesterday, no one would believe him now. After that dazzling strike, a horrifying wound appeared below the evil buffalo digger's neck. Dark red blood gushed from the gaping cut. The surrounding flesh smoothly peeled back, revealing the fractured bone beneath. A red mist even emanated from the wound, a clear sign that its trachea had been severed. "Ooh, ooh." The evil buffalo digger let out a series of unintelligible screams, then quickly bent down. Grabbing a clump of dirt to press against the wound, he went berserk, clutching his heavy shovel with one hand and wildly swinging it. This showcased the creature's incredible strength. The muscles in his shovel-wielding hand bulged, threatening to burst. Yuki had already retreated several steps, leaving 2 of the red goblins to become unfortunate casualties of the enraged evil buffalo digger. Though Yuki had dealt the creature a heavy blow, its tenacity was beyond imagination. It covered its wound with dirt, then brandishing a huge shovel, charged blindly out, its screams echoing like a frantic fly. Yuki was dumbfounded. Such an injury shouldn't have been survivable, yet the monster had escaped. Its vitality could only be described as monstrous. With the arrival of Yuki and his reinforcements, the battle was decisively won. After the Luku insect was killed, the remaining monsters, seized by fear, fled. The remaining firepower was concentrated on the wicked buffalo digger. Even so, under siege, the creature stubbornly charged 40 to 50 meters before being frozen solid by an ice spear, finally falling with unconquerable spite, even in death. Its shovel cleaved a large tree in 2, the thunderous crash a testament to its abnormal tenacity. Yuki let out a relieved breath. To not feel tense facing such a tenacious creature would have been a lie. At that moment, he saw the tall, thin man with the revolver approach, pressing the barrel against his hat brim before whistling. Yuki remembered the grenade the man had thrown earlier and nodded with a smile. "Hello, do they call me the preacher?" The gunman nodded. Then, looking at the corpse of the wicked buffalo digger in the distance, he gave Yuki a thumbs up. "A perfect cut, absolutely perfect." Yuki chuckled. "You flatter me." Z then lowered his voice. "But, I've always been puzzled. You didn't make a move. Yet why did he suddenly blank out for a moment? Could you be a psychokinetic from LDT? Of course, I don't mean anything by it. I'm just curious." Yuki chuckled again. "Strictly speaking, I should thank you." Z was taken aback. "Thank me? What do you mean?" Yuki said. "Thanks for throwing that blinding flashbang. It showed me this guy's weakness." Doise froze, clearly still not understanding. "So," Yuki smiled faintly, surveying the surroundings before stepping back and gesturing. "Come over here, and charge towards me. Keep facing me even when I move." Dois, full of questions, obeyed. As he charged, he noticed Du Yuki shift sideways by a couple of steps, exactly as he had done against the wicked buffalo digger. To keep facing, Dois had to subtly adjust his direction. He didn't think it was a big deal, but the moment he turned, a blinding light hit him, causing his vision to blur. Stunned, Dois sighed in admiration. Amazing! It was sunrise, the sky ablaze with. Knowing the wicked buffalo digger's weakness was its fear of bright light, Du Yuki had set a trap. His 2 steps weren't to evade the charge, but to adjust the angle. If the enemy still changed direction to attack him, it would be facing the rising sun. The reason the nefarious buffalo digger inexplicably paused was because, having spent so long mining in the dark, it was suddenly struck by intense sunlight, causing dizziness. A 1-second pause was, considering its strength, quite impressive. However, for Du Yuki, who had anticipated this flaw, 1 second was more than enough time to fully charge and unleash a devastating blow. This action might seem simple, but consider this: to discover an enemy's flaw in a crisis-ridden battlefield, then cleverly create an environment to exploit it, finally using oneself as bait to lure the enemy. Each step is meticulously calculated. It requires cunning, composure, adaptability and courage, none of which can be spared. Chapter Arad 19. Du Yuki was about to speak with Duizi when he heard the Major Chu let out a sharp cry. Master Du, where are you? Zhou Qian's voice was filled with anxiety and urgency. Du Yuki immediately apologized to Duzi with a smile, then responded and ran towards Zhou Qian. Even before he got close, he saw a large crowd gathered, their faces etched with tension. Du Yuki managed to squeeze through the crowd and saw a grizzled man lying on the ground, eyes clipped purple. His left hand clad in a mechanical gauntlet similar to the black axe, his right hand grotesquely deformed, bulging with veins, and a swirling, intensely hot, crimson light emanating from him. A pungent smell of blood filled the air. Someone was desperately trying to pour alchemic potions down his throat, but to no avail. The expensive potions flowed uselessly from the corners of his mouth, dripping onto the ground. Beside him, a 13 or 14-year-old girl with a round face, tears streaming down her cheeks, sobbed uncontrollably, clutching the man's hands tightly, her eyes fixed on the person trying to force the potion into his mouth. For some reason, upon seeing the round-faced girl, Du Yuki felt a strange connection, as if there was an innate link between them, as if her heartbeat transmitted a sense of strength to him. Instantly, a realization dawned on him. This was Ming Shi, the magic summoner who had called him, based on what Zhou Qian had told him yesterday.